They say it's wise not to mess with quiet people. I guess Cynthia missed that memo. I was just trying to live a simple, peaceful life. Little cabin in the corner, tools right where I need them, and not a soul bothering me. Then out of nowhere, I glance outside and see a golf cart plugged into my outdoor outlet like it pays rent. That was the moment everything changed. What happened next? Well, things got a little charged. You tell me, did I overreact, or not go nearly far enough? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if this kind of chaos rings any bells, stick around. Welcome to QA Stories. This is just the beginning. Now, this neighborhood, it's basically golf cart central. And I mean that in the most literal way. Everyone uses these little electric carts to get around. Going to the clubhouse for poker night? Golf cart. Need to check if your social security deposit hit? Golf cart. Visiting the neighbor 2 houses down for a spoonful of sugar? You already know a golf cart. My cabin is tucked away exactly where I want it, secluded, back corner of the neighborhood, with just the right amount of breathing room between me and everyone else. Outside, I've got a basic power outlet I use for tools and equipment when I'm fixing things around the house. Nothing special, just something that makes life a little smoother. I figured the HOA rules would help preserve the peace. It's your typical HOA setup. Everything from fence heights to mailbox paint colors requires permission. One neighbor even got fined because their flag was 2 inches too wide. Yeah, no joke. Some rules make sense. No one wants to live next to a junkyard. But others, let's just say some folks clearly need a hobby and a little less control over what other people do on their own property. Still, I follow the rules. I'm not here to stir the pot. I just want to be left alone. I had recently installed a deer deterrent system to protect my tomatoes. The local wildlife had been helping themselves to my garden, and I was tired of watching them demolish everything I planted. It was a basic setup of the same kind I install for clients all the time. Safe, simple, and effective enough to make the animals think twice before snacking. Truthfully, I thought I'd found my little slice of heaven here. Quiet surroundings, beautiful views, and enough space to work without bothering anyone or being bothered. I chose that corner lot on purpose. I wanted to avoid exactly the kind of neighborly nonsense that was about to land in my lap. I should have known it was too good to last. Last Tuesday morning, I was sipping my coffee and getting ready to head out for an installation job when something outside caught my eye. It wasn't a catastrophe, but it definitely wasn't right either. I looked out at my neatly arranged workspace, and something immediately seemed off. There was a charging cable stretching from somewhere near my house over to a golf cart parked just close enough to access my outdoor outlet. That cable definitely wasn't mine. I walked outside to check, and sure enough, someone had plugged their golf cart into my power, my electricity, my outlet being used without a word. At first, I tried to be optimistic. Maybe it was a harmless mistake. These neighborhoods can be a little confusing, especially with all the winding paths and shared spaces. Maybe someone thought the outlet was fair game, or maybe they were new and unsure about property lines. Maybe their cart battery had died and they grabbed the closest option in a pinch. But then I noticed how deliberate the setup looked. The cable wasn't carelessly thrown or rushed. It was carefully placed, like someone had taken their time to make sure everything was hooked up just right. That didn't sit right with me. Now, I've got a solid security system around my place. Comes with the territory when you work with valuable tools, so you don't want your gear walking off the job site. My cameras have saved me more than once. So, I figured I'd check the footage and see who thought they could just tap into my power without asking. I watched the clip, then I watched it again, and a third time. I couldn't believe it. It was so bold, so intentional. I had to make sure I wasn't missing something. There she was, Cynthia Doyle, clear as day. Her reputation in the community preceded her. Retired real estate agent, longtime HOA board member, the type of person who always has something to say and makes sure everyone hears it. But in that footage, she didn't look lost or confused. She pulled up, glanced around like she was making sure no one was watching, then calmly and confidently plugged her card into my outlet. No hesitation, no second guessing, just this entitled, smug certainty like the outlet was hers by right. Now look, I try to give people the benefit of the doubt. especially in a place where we all have to coexist. Maybe she really did have a battery emergency. Maybe she honestly thought the outlet was some kind of communal utility. So I took the polite route. I unplugged her cart and left a simple, respectful note. "Hi, this outlet is part of my property. Please ask before using. Thanks, Nate." It was courteous, direct, and gave her the chance to make things right if it was just a misunderstanding. But something about her behavior on that camera wouldn't leave me alone. It kept scratching at the back of my mind. She didn't look uncertain. She looked like someone who had done this more than once, like someone who knew exactly what she was doing. Cynthia clearly had a habit of treating other people's property like her personal playground. I kept trying to tell myself I was overreacting and that maybe I was misreading an innocent situation. I stood there, holding that note, wondering if I was making something out of nothing. But deep down, something didn't sit right. It felt like I just fired the opening shot in a battle I hadn't even realized I was part of. 3 days later, I was in my garage, elbow deep in equipment maintenance, when I heard the familiar whir of a golf cart outside. Normally, the sound blended into the background noise around here like birds chirping, but something about this one caught my attention. Maybe it was instinct, maybe it was recognition. Either way, I looked up. And there she was, Cynthia Doyle, back again, calm as ever, rolling right up to my outlet like she had a lease on it. This time, I wasn't going to wait for the camera footage to piece it all together. I wanted to see it for myself, alive and unfiltered. I positioned myself just right at the garage window where I could see everything clearly, but still stay out of sight. She definitely noticed my note from earlier. I watched as she picked it up off the ground exactly where I'd left it. She looked it over slowly, like she was taking in every word, and then she crushed it in her hand with deliberate carelessness and tossed it into the basket of her cart like it was some discount flyer. My jaw practically hit the floor. I said it out loud. Are you kidding me? The audacity was on another level. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't an emergency. This wasn't an innocent neighborly blunder. This was her flipping the bird to a perfectly respectful boundary. She read my message, understood it, and decided my property and my voice didn't matter. The message was loud and clear. I don't care what you think, and I'll do what I want anyway. Apparently, being queen bee of the home and regular neighborly decency didn't apply to her. But here's where things really went off the rails. Midway through her little charging session, she started doing something that made me step even closer to the window. She didn't just plug the cart in and leave it. She started weaving the cable behind shrubs, looping it around fence posts, doing her best to hide the entire setup from view. I stood there stunned, watching her put actual effort into concealing the fact that she was siphoning electricity off my outlet. This wasn't borrowing. This wasn't asking. This was full-blown sneaky behavior, a cover-up, a deliberate attempt to hide something she knew was wrong. And that's the part that infuriated me the most. If she truly believed what she was doing was fine, she wouldn't be hiding it. But the fact that she was trying so hard to keep it under wraps made one thing clear. She knew it was wrong, and she was doing it anyway. This wasn't just inconsiderate anymore, it was intentional theft, dressed up in HOA entitlement. And somehow, the attempt to be stealthy made it feel even more insulting than if she'd just walked up and blatantly plugged in. Like she thought I was either too dumb to notice or too passive to confront her even if I did. You know what got under my skin the most? It wasn't the electricity. We're talking a few bucks, maybe. It was the blatant disrespect, the assumption that I wouldn't say a word, that I'd just sit there like some quiet pushover while she used me. I install electrical systems for a living. I notice when wires and cables are out of place. Spotting irregularities is second nature. But this wasn't about technical know-how. This was about basic human decency. About having enough respect for the people around you to honor their space and their property. She read my note. She chose to ignore it. And in doing so, she decided that I wasn't worth the courtesy of even asking. Because to her, I was just some quiet guy who wouldn't fight back. Someone she could bulldoze without consequence. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was insulted. And that's a different kind of fire. That night, I stood over the electrical diagram of my property, as something I review regularly out of habit. I know every line, every connection, every circuit that runs through and around my place. And as I stared at those plans, I started to feel a shift. My dear deterrent system of the one I'd installed after those animals demolished my gardenia came to mind. It's a safe and legal setup, one I use for clients all the time to protect their landscaping and crops from wildlife, and that's when it clicked. A completely legal, absolutely fair solution to my problem. Something that would draw a very clear line without me needing to say another word. A boundary, reinforced with voltage and a message that wouldn't get tossed in anyone's basket. Maybe being polite had run its course. As I looked over the setup and ran through the possible outcomes in my head, I realized I had two choices. Let her keep treating me like a doormat or remind her, in the most unforgettable way, that quiet doesn't mean weak, that even the calmest people have a limit. And I was just about to reach mine. There's something you learn quickly in the electrical trade, how important it is to do everything safely and by the book. One misstep can cost you more than just a job. It can damage your reputation, shut down your business, or worse, you get someone hurt. That's why, as tempting as it was to rig up some kind of Home Alone prank, I knew better. What I had in mind was simpler, cleaner, entirely legal and, more importantly, completely safe. My dear deterrent system uses what's known in the field as a pulse fence. It's the same technology farmers have been using for decades to manage livestock and keep predators at bay. It gives off a high voltage, low amperage jolt, strong enough to get your attention, harmless enough that it couldn't keep an LED nightlight glowing for more than a few seconds. It's kind of like the jolt you get from a 9-volt battery on your tongue. Surprising, sure, but not dangerous, just enough to leave an impression. I'd installed this exact setup for dozens of clients, of people tired of raccoons, deer, or curious critters rummaging through their gardens. It's legal everywhere I've worked, and when installed properly, it's safe and extremely effective at reinforcing boundaries, whether you're dealing with a deer or someone a little more entitled. The actual setup was simple. All I had to do was connect my existing garden fence, already wired and active, to the outdoor outlet she kept using. Just one extra connection, using standard equipment. From that point on, anyone trying to touch that outlet without asking would get a quick, gentle reminder that the space wasn't theirs to use. It wasn't revenge, and not in the way people usually think of it. It was more like education, taught in the most memorable way possible. The next morning, I found myself glued to the window like a kid on Christmas morning. Only instead of hoping for gifts, I was waiting to see if Cynthia would return for her usual unauthorized charge-up. Every time I heard the buzz of a golf cart pass by, my heart picked up pace. Would this be the one? Would this be the moment she finally learned the definition of no? Part of me hoped she wouldn't come back at all. Maybe she'd found another outlet to mooch from. Or, better yet, maybe she'd come to her senses and started paying for her own electricity like a normal person. But sure enough, around 10 a.m., her unmistakable little cart appeared on the path, moving with the same smug confidence as always, like she owned the place and everyone in it. She parked in nearly the exact same spot as before, glanced around to check for spectators and unaware that I was very much watching, and went right back to her routine. She started weaving the cable behind shrubs, looping it around the fence just like before, as if she were preparing for some covert military operation. I watched her go through the entire absurd ritual and thought to myself, just a bit closer, Cynthia. You're about to get your lesson. With that usual self-important air, she approached my outlet, cable in hand, not a single shred of hesitation in her step. No doubt, no second thoughts, just the kind of arrogance that says she's never had to deal with real consequences in her entire life. Then a contact. She opened the cover, reached down, and zap, the shriek that came out of her was sharp, shrill, and full of disbelief. She jumped back so fast she nearly fell, flinging the cable and stumbling into her golf cart like she just grabbed a live snake. Her hand flailed in the air, coffee nearly went flying, and she yelled out loud enough to rattle the windows. What the hell? She spun in circles, staring around like she'd been assaulted by a ghost. The fence had done exactly what it was built to do, delivered a brief, harmless jolt, just enough to scream, "This isn't yours." No burns, no injury, just a direct message wrapped in voltage. For several long seconds, she just stood there, frozen, glaring at my outlet like it had betrayed her, like she was expecting an apology from an electrical socket. I watched the expressions play across her fascia: confusion, outrage, then something close to fear, the kind that settles in when you realize you've stepped way over the line. She kept shaking her hand, muttering to herself, probably wondering whether she was having a stroke or if my property had been cursed. "I'll be honest," I laughed, not a cruel, villainous laugh, just a quiet, satisfied chuckle, the kind you make when you watch someone finally get what's been coming to them. But even with the satisfaction, I felt something else too, a kind of heaviness, because this wasn't a comic strip or some slapstick comedy. This was real life, and that jolt clearly scared her more than she expected. I wasn't sure if I felt proud, but I definitely felt justified. She had ignored every warning, dismissed every polite attempt at communication, and kept pushing. And now, she finally hit the line, and that line hit back. Sometimes, people don't understand words. Sometimes, you have to speak in a language they recognize. And apparently, the only language Cynthia understood was the physical reality of consequences. As she drove away, still fuming, muttering under her breath and flexing her hand, I felt a strange mix of relief and anticipation. The relief, she finally realized I wasn't someone to be steamrolled. That her power trip had finally run into a wall she couldn't push past. The anticipation? Well, if there's one thing I know about entitled people, if there's one thing I've learned about entitled people over the years, it's that they never accept defeat quietly. The moment someone stands up to them, they don't retreat or they escalate. And I knew, deep down, that this wasn't over, not with someone like Cynthia. The real question wasn't whether my little electric reality check had solved the immediate problem. It was what Cynthia would do next now that her ego had taken a hit. Because people like her don't take embarrassment well, especially not public embarrassment. Sure enough, just a couple of hours later, my phone rang. It was one of those unknown local numbers that immediately make your stomach twist, because they rarely bring good news. I almost ignored it, but against my better judgment, I picked up on the fourth ring and instantly wished I hadn't. There's a specific kind of dread that hits you when a member of the HOA board says the words "serious incident report." It's like bureaucratic doom delivered in a polite, passive-aggressive tone. "Mr. Harper, this is Peterson, president of the HOA board," came the voice on the other end. "We need to discuss a report we received this morning involving your property and what's being described as a hazardous electrical situation that resulted in injury." My heart sank. Cynthia hadn't just slinked away after getting caught. She'd gone full retaliation mode and taken her version of events straight to the top. "What kind of incident are we talking about, Mr. Peterson?" I asked, doing my best to keep my tone calm, even though I could already feel irritation bubbling beneath the surface. "Well, one of our residents reported being injured by some kind of electrical device on your property," he said, slipping into that cold, clipped tone HOA types love to use when they think they've got a problem homeowner on their hands. "She's claiming you've installed a hazardous system without permits or appropriate signage, and that she received a shock while walking near your house." "Injured? Walking past my house? That's like claiming you got a sunburn from opening the refrigerator." "Mr. Peterson," I began, "there seems to be a serious misunderstanding. I have a professionally installed, code-compliant wildlife deterrent system set up around my garden. It's the same kind of system used across the country to keep animals from destroying landscaping. It's legal, it's safe, and it's specifically designed not to cause harm to people or animals." Before he arrived at my home, Peterson filled me in on the complaint in more detail. And let me tell you, Cynthia's version of the story was nothing short of theatrical. According to her, she was innocently walking past my property when she accidentally brushed against my outlet and received a severe electric shock, a one so powerful, she claimed, it could have endangered a more vulnerable resident. She completely rewrote the script. No mention of the golf cart. No mention of the cable. No mention of the repeated trespassing and unauthorized use of my power outlet. In her version, she was the frail victim of an unprovoked electrical ambush. I'd seen stuff like this on drama YouTube channels of people who get caught doing something wrong and immediately flip the narrative to make themselves look like the victim. But going through it in real life, that's a different level of infuriating. It's gaslighting. Plain and simple. When Peterson arrived later that afternoon, he was all business, stern, polite, and formal. He had the energy of a retired high school physics teacher who now ran the HOA with the same seriousness he once reserved for lab safety rules. Clipboard in hand, pen at the ready, he looked like he was preparing to administer a pop quiz on property compliance. "I'd like to take a look at the electrical setup you've installed," he said, as if he were prepping to build a legal case. I walked him around the property and calmly explained how the system worked, pointing out every safety feature and explaining the basics. It was the same type of deterrent system used by farmers and ranchers for generations, designed to gently keep animals in or out without causing harm. This setup uses the same specifications as a standard livestock fence, I told him. Completely legal. The voltage is noticeable, sure, but the amperage is so low it can't do more than startle. It's used across the country every single day. Peterson nodded as he jotted down detailed notes, his face unreadable. Then he said, "Ms. Doyle claims there were no warning signs posted to indicate the presence of an electrical system. That, apparently, was a big part of her complaint." I answered, "Warning signs aren't legally required for this kind of private wildlife system when installed properly and used on one's own property. But I can show you something that might put this whole situation in perspective via something that explains why she was actually on my property to begin with." I pulled out my phone and queued up the relevant security footage. If words weren't enough, video would make it crystal clear. "This should help clarify what had really happened," I said as I hit play. Peterson watched silently, but I could tell his demeanor started to shift. There was a subtle change in tension in his posture, easing just slightly as he saw the footage with his own eyes. First, the unmistakable image of Cynthia's golf cart pulling up to my yard like it was a routine visit. Then, her grabbing the cable, sneaking it behind the bushes, and winding it around the fence posts like she was in a spy movie. No hesitation, no accident. When the video reached the part where she got zapped and leapt back in shock, Peterson raised an eyebrow. It was subtle, but telling. "So broken bar she was attempting to use your electricity without permission?" he asked, though from his tone, it was clear he already knew the answer. "For the third time," I said. Yes, I did," I confirmed. "After the first time, I left her a courteous note asking her not to use my outlet anymore. You can even see her pick it up and toss it aside in the video like it meant nothing." Peterson remained silent for a long moment, staring at the screen as Cynthia's little performance played out. Again first confusion, then annoyance, then that frantic glance around to see if anyone had witnessed her humiliation. Her expression said it all, not embarrassment over being caught stealing, but frustration that it didn't go her way. "What would you do in my shoes? Trust that facts and video footage would be enough to clear your name? Or start bracing yourself for the next round, knowing full well you're dealing with someone who's already proven she'll lie without hesitation to protect her pride?" Peterson didn't give me much to go on. His poker face could have hidden anything from mild annoyance to a full-blown vendetta. When he finally closed his notebook and walked away with a polite nod, I was left standing there, wondering whether I just protected myself or signed up for something worse. 2 days later, the answer arrived in my inbox. I stared at the email from the HOA board for a solid minute before I worked up the nerve to open it. My stomach twisted with the uncertainty of it all. I had no clue which side Peterson had taken after reviewing the situation. The message was short, direct, and more of a relief than I could have hoped for. After reviewing the incident, including provided video footage and all relevant HOA regulations, the board has determined that Mr. Harper's wildlife deterrent system is fully compliant and legally installed within his property boundaries. We recommend posting a small courtesy notice near the outlet to alert service providers and visitors of the system's presence. That was it. No warnings, no fines, no demands to dismantle the system, no threats of legal action on behalf of Cynthia. Just a simple acknowledgement that I'd done everything correctly and a perfectly reasonable suggestion to add a warning sign. I let out a sharp, surprised laugh, one of those reflexive releases of pressure when you realize you've been holding your breath for days without even noticing. The system worked. Not the electric Colonia though the TUA, but the one that's supposed to protect people who follow the rules. Facts and proof had actually trumped manipulation and false claims. It felt like a win. For a few brief minutes, I allowed myself to believe the ordeal was finally behind me, that maybe I could go back to my peaceful routines, my little garden, and a quiet life where no one siphoned power from my outlet. But peace, as I was about to find out, sometimes isn't the ending, it's just the pause before the next round. If I thought Cynthia Doyle would take the loss with any measure of grace or maturity, I couldn't have been more wrong. Less than a week after the HOA's decision came down, I started noticing a subtle but unmistakable shift in how some of my neighbors treated me. The change wasn't loud or confrontational, nothing you could point to as overt hostility, just coolness. Conversations that used to be easy now felt awkward and short. Smiles became thinner, eye contact briefer. It was like I'd suddenly become the guy everyone was being polite to and not with. Then one morning, I happened to walk past the community mailbox just as a neighbor from a few doors down was chatting with a friend. "I just think it's kind of reckless," she said in that faux concerned tone people use when they're pretending to care. He had no signs up until the HOA practically forced him. What if a kid had wandered over and gotten hurt? And just like that, it clicked. Cynthia hadn't taken her defeat lying down. She had pivoted, like any seasoned manipulator does. Since the official route didn't get her what she wanted, she'd turned to the back channels to the gossip circuit. Her campaign wasn't public or loud. It was quiet, subtle, and spread one whispered conversation at a time. She'd crafted a new narrative, one where she wasn't the trespasser or the thief, but the concerned citizen who nearly got electrocuted by an unmarked hazard, a misunderstood victim looking out for the neighborhood. And without the full story, it was just believable enough for people to buy into. She never mentioned the repeated trespassing, never brought up the stolen electricity or how many warnings she'd ignored. That was all conveniently left out. She framed it as a public safety issue, leaving the rest to imagination. About a week into her little smear campaign, I ran into a landscaper I'd worked with before while picking up supplies at the hardware store. We got to chatting about neighborhood projects, and somehow Cynthia's name came up. "The Doyles?" he said, shaking his head with a sigh. "Yeah, nice folks on the surface, but I think they're having a rough go financially right now." She asked me last month if I knew anyone selling used extension cords cheap, said they were trying to shave off costs however they could, and suddenly, everything clicked. What I had interpreted as sheer entitlement started to make sense in a different way. This hadn't just been about power trips or HOA pride. Cynthia wasn't just being greedy, she was trying to save money. Stealing power from various outlets around the neighborhood may have felt like a harmless workaround to her. A few bucks here and there, multiplied over time, could actually make a noticeable difference. It didn't make what she did okay, not even close, but it did give her behavior context. This wasn't just a petty neighbor feud anymore. It was a desperate, quiet hustle, disguised as arrogance. Later that same week, another neighbor casually mentioned seeing Cynthia rummaging through the community recycling bins, specifically, collecting old extension cords and discarded electrical wire. It painted a picture I hadn't been prepared for. This wasn't just petty theft or entitlement anymore, it was starting to look a lot like quiet, private desperation, the kind that creeps in slowly when retirement doesn't go according to plan. And I hated how that made me feel. It created this uneasy blend of reluctant sympathy and growing bitterness, like someone was trying to pull at your compassion with hands that were already covered in dirt. I understood financial strain. I knew what it was like to count every dollar and stretch every bill when things got tight. But empathy doesn't erase boundaries. Being broke doesn't entitle anyone to steal from the people around them, no matter how quietly or cleverly they go about it. And what stung the most, if she had just come to me like a decent human being and asked if she could charge her golf cart once in a while because times were tough, I probably would have said yes. Most of the time, I try to be the kind of neighbor who helps when he can. But Cynthia didn't ask. She took, she lied, she schemed. She escalated the situation when she was confronted, then launched a campaign to damage my reputation when things didn't go her way. That wasn't desperation. That was manipulation. That was someone choosing to double down rather than take responsibility. So, number. I didn't feel bad about the fence anymore. For the next 2 weeks, things actually seemed in a broken bar quiet, almost suspiciously so. No more attempts at my outlet, no more sideways glances at the mailbox. I started to let my guard down, thinking maybe she'd found a new target, or maybe, just maybe, she'd learned her lesson. But deep down, I should have known better. People like Cynthia don't vanish. They plot. And the moment someone like her goes quiet, that's when you should really start paying attention. The first complaint came from a neighbor 2 houses down, as someone who'd always been warm and pleasant. She caught me as I was checking my mail. "Nate, sorry to bug you, but a broken bar ever since you installed that fence. Our Wi-Fi's been acting possessed," she said with a half laugh. "It drops out randomly, and my husband's working from home now, and it's really messing with his Zoom calls." I blinked. Wi-Fi interference? From my dear fence? That made no sense. My system used frequencies nowhere near household internet channels. They were designed to avoid overlap. Still, I told her I'd look into it just in case. The next day, a different neighbor approached me. "Hey, Nate. Weird question, but has your electric thing been messing with garage door openers?" Apparently, his had been opening and closing on its own lately, mostly at night. His wife was convinced the house was haunted. Then someone from the corner house knocked on my door. "Our baby monitor's been screeching like a dying robot every night," she said, blurry-eyed. "Started about the same time your system went up. We haven't slept properly in days." And just like that, within 2 weeks, I was being blamed for every strange electronic glitch in a 5-house radius. Wi-Fi crashes, garage doors going rogue, baby monitors turning into banshees. All suspiciously vague, all maddeningly specific, and all pointed straight back to me. Here's the thing. I know how electricity works. I've been a professional electrician for over 15 years. The system I installed outputs low-voltage pulses at regulated intervals and operates on a narrow, isolated frequency band. It's physically impossible for it to mess with routers, smart devices, garage door signals, or anything else these people were describing. But the accusations kept rolling in, and they were gaining traction. Was I being gaslit by the neighborhood, or was someone staging this with precision? Out of pure frustration and a growing sense that I might actually be losing my mind, I borrowed a high-grade signal analyzer from a friend in the trade and spent the entire weekend running diagnostics on my property. Every test came back spotless. No electromagnetic interference, no frequency bleed, no rogue signals, no anomalies at all. The setup was as clean and compliant as the day I'd installed it. But the neighbors didn't care about test results. They cared about what Cynthia was whispering into their ears. And as the rumors grew louder, my reputation started to unravel. I went from helpful, quiet guy to the one with the freaky fence that's killing the Wi-Fi. I could feel it in every interaction, of people treating me differently, stepping back, talking shorter, watching their words like I'd become radioactive. It was infuriating. I wasn't paranoid. I was being framed. I knew it. I could feel it in my bones. So, I decided to do what I should have done from the beginning. Dig deep. I pulled up the footage from every single security camera on my property, not just the ones pointed at the outlet, all of them. I sifted through days and nights of recordings, combing through timestamps, watching for anything out of place, any pattern that might explain what was really going on. And then I saw something I couldn't unsee. Broken bar monitor boxes. The shift in the room was immediate. What started as mild curiosity became sharp, collective silence. No one moved. No one spoke. You could almost hear people recalibrating everything they thought they knew about the guy with the electric fence. On the screen, the young man, a baseball cap pulled low, hoodie zipped up, crouched beside various homes, tampering with Wi-Fi gear and junction boxes like he'd done it 100 times before. No hesitation, no confusion, just quiet sabotage. Then came the timestamps, each one perfectly aligned with the day that household first complained about strange electronic interference. And finally, side-by-side clips, Cynthia whispering to him near the mailbox broken bar, then him showing up hours later behind a neighbor's shed. When I paused the footage, the silence in the room was deafening. Every complaint about interference lines up with the appearance of these devices, I said, my voice steady but low enough that people leaned in to hear. These weren't glitches. They were planted. Then I clicked to the next slide. High-resolution photos from Marcus's RF scan. Clear readings. Identifiable jammers. Cheap black market tech designed to scramble signals just enough to cause chaos without tripping any safety systems. The devices had been tucked under bushes, behind cable boxes, inside empty flower pots. "These are illegal," I said. "And these weren't just some harmless prank. They caused real disruption to your homes, to your jobs, to your sleep. And they were planted deliberately to make it seem like my equipment was to blame." I let that hang for a moment. People started shifting uncomfortably in their chairs. Some were leaning toward their neighbors, whispering. A few looked at Cynthia, whose face was frozen, masking panic under a strained facade of disbelief. I turned to Peterson. "Marcus, my colleague, independently confirmed with commercial-grade equipment that my system produces no interference with household electronics. Zero. Nothing. And yet these jammers," I pointed to the screen, "do exactly that. They're what caused your Wi-Fi drops, your garage door malfunctions, your baby monitor static, not my fence." A soft murmur rippled through the crowd. Then someone spoke. "You mean a broken bar?" This was all a setup. It was the neighbor with the garage door issues, visibly stunned. "All those nights my door opened by itself, if that was staged." I nodded. "Every one of your homes was specifically targeted to match a pattern of complaints. Cynthia created a problem, then blamed it on me to destroy my reputation." All eyes turned to Cynthia. She opened her mouth like she might say something, maybe a denial, maybe a weak excuse, but nothing came out. Instead, I played one last video. The moment Cynthia herself pulled a small device out of her purse and handed it discreetly to the same young man outside the recycling center. They both looked around like spies exchanging state secrets. When the screen went black, the silence was total, and then, one by one, people started turning away from Cynthia. Conversations sparked across the room, eyebrows raised, heads shaking. No one looked at me with suspicion anymore. They looked at her. I closed my laptop and folded my hands. "I'm not asking for anything," I said. "I'm not pressing charges. I'm not demanding apologies. But I am asking for my name to be cleared and for all of you to understand exactly how far someone went to destroy it." Peterson stood up slowly. He didn't speak right away, but when he did, his words were clear. "We'll be launching a formal inquiry into this, effective immediately. In the meantime, I believe Mr. Harper has more than cleared his name." A quiet wave of nods swept the room. The meeting adjourned without another word from Cynthia. She slipped out the side door before the final announcements were even made. No one stopped her. No one called her name. She just vanished into the night, like a villain who realizes the curtain has finally fallen on their performance. But me, I walked out of that room with my head high and my conscience clean, because the truth didn't just come out, it roared. The moment one of the affected neighbors pointed at the screen and gasped, I knew the tide had turned. "That's exactly when my internet started acting up," she exclaimed. "Right after I saw someone near my router. I didn't think anything of it at the time." In the back row, Cynthia froze, her fingers clenched so tightly her knuckles turned white. Around the room, murmurs swelled as realization spread. People were connecting the dots, linking their own electronic issues to very specific incidents they'd now seen with their own eyes. The myth of my dangerous fence was unraveling fast, but it was Tom Bradley who drove the final nail in the coffin. Tom, who lived near the front of the community and noticed everything, suddenly stood up, voice loud and full of clarity. "That's him. That punk was under my porch last week, and look what I found stuck under there." He held up his phone and displayed a photo of an identical signal jammer to the ones Marcus and I had discovered. The room erupted. Voices overlapped as neighbors began sharing stories. "I saw him near my shed too. There was something weird behind my garage. My baby monitor went nuts that night." Phones came out. Photos were passed around. There was shock, frustration, and an almost audible shift in collective opinion. Cynthia had crossed a line, and everyone knew it now. She sat motionless, visibly shrinking in her chair as her carefully constructed narrative crumbled. No more aloof smirks or passive-aggressive comments, just stunned silence and the cold weight of accountability. Peterson finally called for order and addressed the room like a disappointed teacher calling out a failing student. "Miss Doyle," he said evenly, voice carrying with quiet authority, Would you like to respond to the allegations and the evidence we've just seen? Cynthia's expression flickered through denial, panic, defiance, and finally resignation. "Yeah, broken bar, I don't know what you're talking about," she mumbled, her voice shaking. No one believed her, not even close. She didn't need to be officially sanctioned. The community had seen the truth, and undeniable, time-stamped, caught on camera. Her influence collapsed overnight. In the weeks that followed, Cynthia found herself politely ignored. No more invites to book clubs or porch coffees. Her comments at home meetings were met with silent nods and then promptly forgotten. Her power evaporated. As for the young man she'd hired, he vanished after Tom's revelation, no doubt realizing he'd crossed legal lines that came with serious consequences. Marcus and I spent the following Saturday sweeping the neighborhood with his RF detector, locating and removing the remaining jammers one by one. And just like that, Wi-Fi stabilized, garage doors stopped acting possessed, and baby monitors went back to broadcasting babies instead of haunted static. About a month later, while I was tending my garden, I heard the familiar hum of a golf cart. For a split second, old instincts kicked in, but this time, it was a different neighbor. She smiled, stepped down from her cart, and handed me a plate of homemade cookies. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry for assuming the worst," she said. "You've always been a good neighbor. I should have known better." We shook hands. It was enough. Cynthia still lives in the neighborhood. When we pass on the walking trails, we nod. That's it. No words. Just a quiet, mutual understanding. She knows I know, and she knows I'm not someone to be pushed again. I've learned something important through all of this. You don't defeat people like Cynthia with shouting matches or drama. You do it with patience, evidence, and calm clarity. You let them write their own downfall, and then you show the world what they wrote. Also, my electric bill dropped. Turns out when someone stops siphoning power from your outdoor outlet 3 times a week, it makes a difference. So that's the story of how a golf cart, a deer fence, and one entitled neighbor turned my peaceful life into a slow burn showdown. If you've ever had to deal with a petty HOA disaster or your own neighborhood tyrant, I want to hear about it. Drop your story in the comments. And if this one made you smile, hit that like button, subscribe, and stick around. This is Ya Story Essa, where the quiet ones don't just survive via broken bar, they get efficient. Thanks for watching.